What could be better than taking courses in high school that can get you credit in college? That's exactly what happens when you take an advanced placement class. High school students in Prince George's County now have a minimum of 8 advanced placement course opportunities and oftentimes more at whatever high school they attend. The highly rigorous classes not only offer the promise of college credit if a score of 3 or higher is achieved, but the experience is an invaluable academic transition to college life itself. With the school system now paying for all AP exam fees, formerly a burden on each student, the lure of AP's college-level courses is almost irresistible. To better prepare students to succeed on the AP exams and thus increase their likelihood of earning college credit, listen to the following test experts. Since each one has had long experience in scoring the AP exams, their advice and insights on how the tests are formatted, what test-taking strategies work best, and how to successfully prepare for the tests all come from practiced professionals. The Prince George's Schools appreciates the efforts of the College Board, which helped arrange for the people you're about to meet in the 8 episodes of this series.
Hello, I am Fraser O'Leary and I'm an AP Language and Literature teacher at Cardozo High School in Washington, D.C. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of District of Columbia, where I teach both composition and literature. The literature class is similar to my AP literature class at Cardozo. I'm also a reader for the AP literature exam and want to share with you some information that may help you when you take the exam in May. It is probably important for you to understand that this exam and the other AP exams that you may take during your high school career are much harder than any single exam that you will take when you go to college. Why is this? Why are you being forced to take this exam in 3 hours? It is an easy way for colleges to evaluate you. If you pass this exam, it is a sure indicator that you are much more knowledgeable in the subject than most incoming freshmen and that you deserve college credit. Now, not all colleges give you credit for passing the AP exam. Some colleges only accept a 5, some colleges a 4, some colleges a 3, and some colleges don't accept the AP exam for their own financial reasons. What you don't want to do before and during this exam is to be intimidated. If you have done what you are supposed to do in your class, there should be no surprises. The students who pass the exam are students who read well, comprehend well, and also write well. Do your best on this exam. Let's talk about your preparation before the exam. Here's what you do to prepare. Read, read, and read some more. Write, write, and write some more. Write about what you have read. Read what others have said about what you have read. Let's use Hamlet as an example. There's no single piece of literature in the English language that has been written about more than Hamlet. Almost all AP literature students have read it and written about it. What do others say? Find out and see how your thoughts align with theirs. One of the things that AP students find, and this is what college students find out also, is that their ideas are as sophisticated as critics who are paid for their ideas. Remember that your AP class is the equivalent of a college class. Think like that. As an AP student, you have to challenge yourself to go the extra mile in your quest for excellence. A functional literary vocabulary is essential to your success on this test. Your teacher has introduced you to many literary terms over and over and over again. The importance of your being able to recognize and write about these terms cannot be underestimated. Knowledge of these terms is the key to passing the exam. Basic terms such as diction, syntax, tone, imagery, point of view, allusion, irony, analogy, and symbolism are constantly utilized by the exam makers. Remember that you are trying to beat the exam maker. Figures of speech such as simile, metaphor, alliteration, and personification are rhetorical devices which pop up all the time on the exam. These terms have to be part of your normal literary vocabulary if you expect to pass the exam. The readers of the exam are always impressed by those writers who are able to utilize these devices in their own writing. There is no quick fix to this. You have to be a dedicated scholar. Another role you need to assume, beside that of a scholar, is a time manager. You need to be able to apportion your time with the multiple choice test as well as the essay part. This takes practice. An old joke is that this man is walking down the street in New York City and he has a cello in his hand. And he comes up onto a homeless man. And he asks the man, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And the homeless man says, "Practice, practice, practice." Hardly anyone has ever become a success in life without practice. You want to practice so the exam becomes familiar to you. You can do this on your own. You need to practice away from the class with a clock as your guide. Your teacher can help you evaluate your work by comparing your work with others that he or she has found at workshops or on AP Central. How do you get ready for this exam? The first thing you do is get a good night's sleep. Before the exam, make sure that you get a good night's sleep. This is a 3-hour exam. If it's the first time you're taking an AP exam, it's probably the longest exam you've ever taken that's this intense. Get a good night's sleep. The second thing is have a good breakfast. See if you can talk your teacher into providing breakfast for you the morning of the AP exam. The third thing, bring a snack. A banana, a muffin, an energy bar. Bring a snack. You'll have a break between the multiple choice test and the essay part of the test. Make sure you get something to eat and drink at that break. Number 4, get to school early on the day of the exam. Don't be late. Don't stress out the proctor. Don't stress out your teacher. Get to school early. Bring extra writing tools so you won't be looking for something. Number 6 is very important. You can't bring anything to the exam except something to write with. No dictionaries, no iPods, phones, other electronic devices are allowed on the site. Don't bring anything. Number 7, realize that this is a hard test and deal with it. Just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't be successful. Number 8, when you're writing your essays, do not call the author by his or her first name. Even if you're lucky enough to be on a first name basis with one of the authors on the exam, don't do it when you're writing the essay. It throws the reader off. We'll talk about the reader later. When you're writing your essays, use specific quotations to emphasize your examples. The readers are impressed by quotations used correctly. Number 10, do not waste time praising the author. It doesn't help for you to say that this is the best novel I ever read, or this is the best short story, or this is the best poem, or the best play. It doesn't do anything for the reader at all. Number 11, I was going to show you on my cell phone. Do not use any text messaging vocabulary on your essay. B/C doesn't mean anything to somebody reading that essay. Write out because. Make sure that you follow those rules. The first part of the exam is the multiple choice test. You're given 4 or 5 selections. You have an hour to answer approximately 55 questions that have to do with those 4 or 5 selections. You want to make sure that you read all of the selections first. Now the test is graded just like the SAT test. You get a point for a right answer. You lose 1/4 of a point for a wrong answer, and you don't get any credit or penalty for questions you don't answer. You don't have to answer the questions in order. The first thing you want to do on the multiple choice test is to scan the entire test before you begin answering the questions. Remember, you only have 60 minutes to answer 55 questions. No, you only have 60 minutes to read the selections and then to try to answer 55 questions. And you want to get as many right answers as possible. So you're going to take your time and hurry up, if that makes any sense. You want to make sure that you answer as many right answers as possible. Unlike the SAT, the AP exam does not have levels of difficulty as far as the questions go. Those of you who have taken the SAT exam or SAT prep classes know that you are told that the first section in a section are the easier questions, and then it gets more difficult, and then the most difficult questions in that section are the last ones. On the AP exam, that's not true. The questions follow the text. The last question in a section might be the easiest question. The first question might be the hardest question. It follows the text. So you don't want to use that philosophy, the SAT philosophy, when you're taking the AP test. On the SAT, those of you who have taken the SAT prep have been told to answer the questions which specify line numbers. Usually those are on the SAT are easier to answer because you just have to read 2 lines to answer the question. On the AP exam, almost all of the questions are line number questions. So you don't want to worry about that either. You'd be wasting time looking for lines because they're all line questions, or most of them are. Remember that the test is a test of both reading comprehension and your knowledge of literary terms. You must have a working knowledge of the literary terms you have been studying all year. Now, the terms that I mentioned at the beginning, such as diction and syntax and tone, those kind of general, very important terms are the ones that show up all the time. If you go to the glossary of your literature book, you'll probably have 150 to 200 literary terms. Maybe 30 of those are terms that are going to be really important on the exam. Some terms will show up with which you are not familiar. Don't let that slow you down. There are hundreds of terms that may show up on the test. Most of them are in the wrong answers. There are many little specific literary terms that every English teacher has like their favorite little English literary term. Most of them don't show up on the AP exam anyway. Don't get hung up on those at all. It's a waste of time. The exam will have from 4 to 6 selections. Answer them by degrees of difficulty. Your degree of difficulty. What is difficult to you? Read the selections. Choose the selection that you think is the easiest and do that one first. All right? Make sure that you do that. Answer the easiest selection first and do it in descending order of ease. So the last selection is what you think is the hardest one. Remember that you don't have to answer all of the questions on this exam in order to pass the AP exam. Number 6 is very important for maybe 3 or 4 questions. Don't forget that the questions that contain an except in them are asking for the wrong answer. In those questions, the wrong answer is the right answer. And an example, all the following except blank are 20th century authors. And you can look at this list and you'll see that Nathaniel Hawthorne, letter D, is not a 20th century author. All right? That's the wrong answer. But it's the right answer. So on those except questions, the wrong answer is the right answer. That's very important for 4 or 5. And remember, you're trying to get as many right answers as possible. You have 1 hour to do that multiple choice test. After that hour, you'll get a 10-minute break. After the 10-minute break, you'll have 2 hours to answer 3 essay questions. They'll give you a book. They'll give you the book to write in. You can write all over the book that they give you. Make sure that you do that. Mark up the book. Do your own kind of editing, your own kind of symbols. You should have your own kind of symbolism that you use. If you see an example of diction, it may be a D, it may be a circle, something like that that you use to show you as you're writing, to let yourself know what you're doing. So when you're getting ready for the AP Literature essay exam, remember you don't have to answer the questions in order. This is very important. When you don't have to answer them in order. You all know that one of the questions will be a poem or a speech from a play. One of the questions will be a selection from either a short story or a novel, the prose question. And the third question is the open question. So you can choose to answer those questions in any order that you want to do. Make sure that you understand that. Number 2, make sure that you read the prompt for each question carefully and answer it completely. And I want you to look at the prompt for the question that I graded last summer at the AP reading. This is question number 2, the prose question. Read carefully the following passage from Dalton Trumbo's novel, Johnny Got His Gun, 1939. Then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how Trumbo uses such techniques as point of view, selection of detail, and syntax to characterize the relationship between the young man and his father. I would imagine that most of you have seen this question before. Now, the question says, how does Trumbo use techniques such as point of view, selection of detail, and syntax to characterize the relationship? It's a two-part question. You got to write about the techniques, and you also have to write about the relationship. Now, this question caused students quite a bit of trouble on the AP exam. Most of the students wrote about point of view, selection of detail, and syntax. This question doesn't specifically say that. It says techniques such as those things. So you could have written about diction, or you could have written about tone, or you could have written about something else, another literary technique, and still gotten a good score on the exam. You have to understand that. When you see such as in the prompt, that means that it's open for you to add other things. If it specifically said, if we look at it again, if it said, write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how Trumbo uses point of view, selection of detail, and syntax, then you would have to write about all three of those. And if you didn't write about all three of those, then you couldn't get a good score on the exam. It's very important that you understand what the prompt is doing and how to attack the prompt when you're taking the exam. In the essay, it talks about a son, if you're not familiar with it, and you will have this in front of you. It talks about a son who's going on a fishing trip with his father. And the son decides that he wants to go fishing with his friend rather than his father, and that's never happened before. So it shows the relationship between the father and the son, and it also shows the relationship between the son and the father. And those are two different relationships. So you could approach it either way. It's very important. It was an easy prompt to read, but it was very full of things. All right? And you can work on that in your class. It's very important that you understand that you must answer all three questions in order to pass the test. This is where your time management skills come into play. At the top of each of the essay questions, it says you have approximately 40 minutes to answer the essay. So you got 3 times 40, 120, 2 hours. All right? You don't necessarily have to take 40 minutes for each essay, but you only have 2 hours to answer all 3 of the questions. And don't forget that you want to line them up by degrees of difficulty. Some of you might be much more interested in poetry than you are in prose. So you may want to do the poetry question first. Those of you, and it might be vice versa. A lot of my students sometimes do the open question first because they know what they're going to write about. All right, so your tactics are very important. You need to have a plan before you enter the room to take this exam. You need to know what you want to do. Number 4, readers do not need to have literary terms defined. Don't spend time saying that Trumbo used syntax, which is da 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 da. You don't have to define anything for the reader. The English teachers who are the readers already know the definitions. It's a waste of time. Remember, this is a time test. Remember that the person reading your exam is a high school English teacher or a college English professor, and he or she knows about the fertilizer quotient. Now, what do I mean by that? All of us have been given assignments. Let's say you have to write a 350-word essay. And you get to 250 words and you've already used up everything you know. But you still have 100 words you got to write. And that's where the fertilizer comes in. On this AP essay, the teachers understand that. It's a waste of time. Don't try to do it. It won't work, and it will lower your score. How you approach the writing of your essay is your own business. I'm going to explain 4 o'clock on Thursday, and I'm going to explain a killer opening. So I'll come back to that. Make sure that you give yourself time to read what you have written. When I was making up these papers, I spelled literature wrong. I looked at it and I didn't really edit it until after I had printed it up. And that would have been the worst thing for you to be looking at my paper and literature was spelled wrong, and I'm trying to impress upon you how to pass the literature exam. But we do that all the time when we're hurrying. And you only have a certain amount of time to do this exam. Make sure that you give yourself a little bit of time to go back and read your exam and edit it. Now, we all know as readers that it's a rough draft. And it's graded holistically. Spelling, grammar, and punctuation are important, but they're not. You can misspell words on this exam and get a 9 on it, which is the highest score you can make on it. You can have some grammatical mistakes. You can have some punctuation mistakes and still get a very high score on it because we know it's a rush job. But you can't repeat those mistakes. I tell my students to come into the open question with a novel and a play that they really know well. Remember, you don't have to choose one of the selections given for this question. When you look at the open question as you've practiced in your class, you will have a list of plays and novels that you can choose from. And it'll also say you don't have to choose it, it just has to be of literary merit. Anything that you've read in your AP class this year is a novel or a play of literary merit. And you want to come into that exam with a couple of those in your computer brain, right? If Hamlet, if you read Hamlet, as almost all AP students, lit students do, if that's the play you want to write about, that's fine, all right? You're going to write about whatever you're most comfortable with on that open question. Okay, you finished the exam. Now it's going to go be read. The teachers will go to Louisville, Kentucky, and they'll be there for a week. And the first day, they will spend the entire day working on the one question that they're going to read for the entire week. They will go over a rubric, which will tell them what to look for, and they will do practice grading of those exams all that first day. And then for the next 6 days, they're going to read student exams. Let's say they read 150 exams a day for 6 days. All on the same question. So that last year I read that Dalton Trumbo question for 6 days. And it was interesting. And the teachers are very conscientious. But you have to understand that they're reading the same thing over and over and over again. Most of the time, there will only be one person reading your paper. So that one English teacher from wherever they are from is going to be the one that's going to judge your paper and is going to give you the grade. So it's your job to impress that one person. That person is going to be reading hundreds of papers on the same question. So how do you get that person on your side? My advice to you is a killer opening. What is a killer opening? It's an opening that your paper opens up and lets the reader know that you understand the prompt and that you're ready to write about it and you're excited about writing about it. That's what a killer opening is. Now, I mentioned earlier about 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Four o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. That's about 4 days into the reading. And maybe the reader's a little bit tired and they get your paper. But you've got this killer opening. You've got this great first paragraph or great first and second paragraph that really lets the reader know that you understand. And the reader gets excited. All right? That's what your paper has to. You've got to think about 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, not 8:30 on Sunday morning. The first paper the person reads, you've got to think about 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. Is your paper going to get the attention of that reader? I'm going to go backwards a little bit to number 4, the 5-paragraph essay. You all remember when you first started writing 5-paragraph essays, probably 4th grade, and it's still a great skeletal system to get a 9 on the AP exam. A 5-paragraph skeletal system. Introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Let the reader know that you know. And that's how you do it. Number 6, show off your writing skills. But remember that this is not a creative writing exercise. Some of my most creative students, poets and playwrights and short story writers, don't do well on the AP exam because they can't write in that structure. They start going off into space and just writing these beautiful words, but they don't really connect with the prompt. You've got to connect with the prompt. This isn't a time to show how flowery your writing can be. It is a time to show how sophisticated your writing can be. But make sure that you answer both parts, usually there'll be 2, both parts of the prompt. And don't repeat the prompt in your introduction. You're wasting writing time, and the readers are not impressed with your being able to copy from the test. And last, but far from least, the way that you are successful on the AP exam is by letting the reader know that you know. Let the reader know that you understand the prompt and that you can write about it well. And you'll do really well on the AP exam. Thank you very much.